Hi and welcome to our Introduction to Communication Disorders assignment. Our allocated communication disorder is autism, and we will be defining, comparing and contrasting the lived experiences of two individuals with this communication disorder. So what is autism? Well, the term Autism Spectrum Disorder, or ASD, is defined as a neurodevelopmental syndrome that begins in infancy or early childhood. It includes the way in which an individual relates to his or her own environment and their interaction with people. It is characterized by early dysfunction in social interactions, communication, and repetitive and restrictive behaviors and interests. The word spectrum describes the range of difficulties that people with autism experience and the degree to which they may be affected. The spectrum includes Asperger's syndrome, pervasive developmental disorder, and two very rare disorders, Rett's disorder and childhood disintegrative disorder. People with ASD may be able to live relatively normal lives, while others may require specialist support. People with ASD have a broad range of phenotypes and commonly also have an intellectual disability, speech and language delay, or epilepsy, depending on the severity of their disorder. Since its original description by Leo Kanner in 1943, little was known about the causes of autism spectrum disorders. A review of evidence from several studies has indicated that the causes of ASD include both genetic and environmental factors. So what populations are most affected by autism? Well, cases of autism are found in all populations regardless of socioeconomic class, gender or race. Debate still occurs on the risk factors associated with a child being diagnosed with ASD. For example, children born to older parents have an increased risk of autism diagnosis, as well as infants that are born below average weight. So how prevalent is autism within our society? Well, according to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, approximately 115,400 Australians live with autism. This is a 79% increase from 2009, where approximately 64,400 live with autism. Autism spectrum disorders are more commonly found in males than females. Males are 4 times more likely than females to have the condition, with prevalence rates of 0.8% and 0.2% respectively. Lastly, age is another prevalence factor of autism. There is a significant reduction in prevalence after a child reaches the ages of 5 to 9 years old. Several reasons for this difference among the age groups include a difference in diagnosis and method for deriving at a diagnosis over the years. It has been found that the prevalence of autism has increased distinctly over the last few decades. The cause of this is debatable and could be due to changes in diagnosis and reporting techniques.
The term autism spectrum disorder describes a condition that affects the way a person interacts with and makes sense of other people and their environment. The very name of the disorder implies a continuum on which those who have the disorder present. While all people with ASD experience deficits in social communication, social interaction, and theory of mind, the extent to which they struggle with these aspects of communication varies, and people may have more difficulties in one area of the triad than in others. Here we will compare and contrast the lived experiences of two people with autism spectrum disorder who fall on opposite ends of the spectrum. Previously, A.M. Baggs would meet the criteria of autism, while Daniel Tammet would meet the criteria for Asperger's syndrome, as he lacks significant language deficits, cognitive development, and has self-awareness and curiosity about the environment around him. Currently, according to the current DSM, they would both meet the criteria for ASD, with Tammet being considered a high-functioning autistic, while Baggs considering a low-functioning autistic.
Daniel Tammet, who is on the high-functioning end of the ASD spectrum, claims to have a mastery of language. He has mastered not only English but a multitude of languages and is able to infer meaning from abstract texts such as poetry and essays. He is an academic, an author, and is capable of social interaction and communication. In contrast, we have A.M. Baggs, who is completely nonverbal and communicates only in her own native language that consists of singing, movement, dancing, and interacting physically with the world around her. Despite interacting with the environment around her, she is completely unable to verbally communicate in a social setting. Both Baggs and Tammet perceive the world in a way which is greatly different to a person with a neurotypical brain. They vary vastly in the way in which they interact with the world, but also share common characteristics. Despite their vastly differing communication skills, both Baggs and Tammet show great signs of intelligence and are capable of intelligent thought. Baggs, despite being considered at the low-functioning end of the spectrum due to her mutism, is capable of provocative thought, which she is only able to communicate through a machine. She is often described as being in a world of her own, despite believing that she communicates with all aspects of her environments in a complex way. She views normal communication as a limited range of responses and questions as to how this is considered to be true interaction. Baggs questions why intelligence is so heavily based on language and communication when she herself is a classic example of intelligence without the use of language. Baggs poses an interesting question as to what it means to communicate and why the spoken language is the only form of language that is accepted. It is interesting to note why her own native language is labelled as mysterious and puzzling, while Tammet, who created a language called Manti that conforms with the rules of a typical spoken language, is praised and is seen as highly intelligent. Both Tammet and Baggs share similarities in that their world is enriched with senses. In Baggs' case, communication is not purely dependent on language. It involves movement, pitch, sound, and texture. She claims to be in a constant conversation with every aspect of her environment and reacts fully to all parts of her surroundings, suggesting sensory overload. Tammet also does not see language in a concrete way. His perception of words and numbers involve colour, light and shade, texture and associated meanings, which he uses this to his advantage to allow him to complete complex mathematics in his head and engage with text and language in a deep and meaningful way. While Baggs and Tammet share a multitude of similarities and differences, these are a few examples to highlight the range in which ASD presents itself. While Baggs and Tammet are both highly intelligent individuals, the way in which their symptoms present mean that they communicate in vastly different ways and thus experience a different level of stigma as the result of their disorder. Furthermore, Baggs, being on the low-functioning end of the spectrum, is highly dependent on external help to be able to complete day-to-day tasks, while Tammet is highly independent and successful in his career and personal life. It is clear to see that the autism spectrum disorder is an idiosyncratic disorder that presents itself in a variety of different ways. This means that the lived experience of those with the disorder differs significantly from one person to another, and while they may all share key diagnostic criteria, each individual is impacted in a very unique and individual way.